this is your lecture for chapters 1 and 2. So chapter 1 is just an introduction to medical terminology, and I'll start off with just an explanation of what it is and a few study tips. So this is really the language of medicine. This is the way that healthcare workers are talking. These are the terms that they're using. These are terms that will be in patients' charts. So it's important to be familiar with these terms so that you know what it is that's being discussed when you're having conversations with other healthcare workers and when you're reading in a patient chart. So it does require a lot of memorization. It does require you to take the time to look at the book and to review your notes. The more time you spend, not necessarily just reading, but practicing medical terminology, practicing using the terms and building words, the better you'll become at it. Also, spelling is important. If you are misspelling a medical term, it changes the entire term. So you need to know how to spell it properly and also how to pronounce it properly. If you're mispronouncing a medical term, then people aren't going to know what you're talking about. So it's important to know the proper pronunciation as well as the spelling because it's used in both written and oral communication. So ways to study. This says please read before class. Obviously, we're not having real classes at this point. This is an online class, but read before you're working on the assignments. And make sure that you are always checking D2L, you're checking my announcements, I'll give you updates. In terms of learning the medical terms, if you make index cards or if you just practice writing medical terms on paper, just the process of taking pen to paper and writing down these terms helps it stay in your brain. So having the index cards really does help though, because the process of creating them helps you remember the terms, but then you have those cards for later practicing these medical terms. You can write the name on one side, you can write the definition on the other side. So within a medical term, there are, or could be, 4 main elements or 4 components. There could be a word root or a combining form. There also could be a suffix or a prefix. You don't have to have all 4 of these components. There will always be a word root or a combining form. So the word root is the foundation of a medical term that contains its primary meaning. These are most often derived from Greek or Latin words. And there will, like I said, always be at least one word root in a medical term. A combining form is created when a word root is combined with a vowel. So a combining form basically is a word root with a vowel attached. And that combining vowel is usually an O or an I. So by adding a combining vowel to turn a word root into a combining form, you're allowing the word root to be combined with another element. So when you add that vowel there, it allows you to add a suffix onto the end. A suffix is a word element that's placed at the end of a word, and it can change the entire meaning of a medical word. There will always be a suffix in a medical term. So you will always have a word root or a combining form, which is the word root plus a vowel, and there will always be a suffix. So typically, and we'll talk more about suffixes in chapter 2, but a suffix often describes a disease, a symptom, or a procedure. A prefix is a word element that's placed at the beginning of a word. And a medical term does not always contain a prefix. A prefix typically indicates a number, time, direction, size, or position. And here are a few examples of prefixes. So to define a medical word or a medical term, you start at the end of the word, actually, which is maybe not what you would think. But first, you'll define the suffix. Oops. First, you'll start by defining the suffix. So in this case, the suffix is ia. Then you'll define the first part of the word. So in this case, you'll go all the way to the beginning and define the first part. The first part of the word is either a prefix, or if there's no prefix, it would be the word root or the combining form. And then lastly, you define the middle part of the word, and that's always going to be your word root or your combining form. So let me go back here actually, and we can practice defining. We'll do the first one. So with hyperthermia, we start with the suffix ia. And in chapter 2, you'll learn that ia, means a condition. Then we go to the beginning of the word, hyper. Hyper means above normal or higher than normal. And then we go to the middle. Therm means heat. So we do the last part, the first part, and the middle. Remember, this means a condition. So it's a condition of above normal heat. So hyperthermia is a condition where there's above normal heat. Okay. And then some just guidelines for pronunciation, and these are in your textbook as well. So when you have AE or OE, only the second vowel is pronounced. So in these cases, only the E is pronounced. So Bercy and then Selam. We're only pronouncing the E when you have AE or OE. When PN appears at the beginning of the word, the P is silent. So only the N is pronounced. An example would be pneumonia. You don't pronounce the P there. But if PN appears in the middle of the word, they are both pronounced. So here we have hyperpnea. The P and the N are both pronounced. When PS appears at the beginning of the word, again, the P is silent and just the S is pronounced, like with psychology. And then when forming the final letters of a word, E and ES are pronounced as separate syllables. So instead of syncope, which is what you might think, you pronounce the E, syncope. And this isn't nares, it's nares. You're pronouncing the E. And when I appears at the end of the word, it's pronounced I. So this isn't bronchi, this is bronchi. Okay, one more thing. There is a such thing as having a compound word in medical terminology, and this is typically when there's more than one word root in the medical term. So an example is gastroenteritis. There are two word roots here, gaster and enter. Okay, with gastritis, there's only one word root, gaster. But here there are two. Okay, so these are the middle parts of the word, so you define those last. You'll always go to the suffix first and then to the beginning and middle of the word. Now we'll move into chapter 2, and this covers suffixes. Remember that suffixes are typically added to the end of a word to change the word's meaning. So if you change a suffix, it's going to change the entire meaning of the word. There are a few different suffix types. A surgical suffix is used to describe an invasive procedure on a body part. A diagnostic suffix describes a procedure performed to identify the cause and the nature of an illness. Pathological suffixes describe an abnormal condition or disease. And grammatical suffixes are attached to words to form parts of speech, like to change a word to an adjective, for example. So I'll give you a list of common suffixes of these different types, surgical, diagnostic, etc. These are also found in your textbook, and these are very commonly seen. So you'll see ectomy a lot. Ectomy means the removal or excision of something. So if you've ever heard of someone having an appendectomy, that's the surgical removal of the appendix. Diagnostic suffixes. So here again are very commonly used ones. An example would be an electrocardiogram. So you start to define that word, you start with the end. Gram is a record. So this is a record of, and then remember it's electrocardiogram. So we go to the beginning of the word, electro, that means electrical activity, and then cardio means heart. So it's a record of the electrical activity of the heart. All right, pathological suffixes. We've got a lot of these. So you can see the terms, or I'm sorry, the suffixes and their definitions. And again, a lot of these are pretty common. We'll see algia a lot. Algia is the very first one here. Algia is pain, or dynia means pain. So neuralgia is nerve pain. And then the last ones, these are the grammatical suffixes that are attached to words to turn them into adjectives or turn them into nouns. And I listed some of the most common ones. Ia, we dealt with that one earlier with hyperthermia. Ia means condition, and so does ism. And then there are a few that also mean medicine or treatment. Iatry or ist. And then all of these suffixes mean pertaining to. So an example would be cardiac. Cardi refers to the heart, and ac means pertaining to. So cardiac means pertaining to the heart.